Welcome to the Green Dialogue, and every month we have a new topic of discussion. And today we're joining with Pat Lindemann, our Drain Commissioner, and we're going to talk about some of the projects he's involved with. And welcome everybody. The first 15 to 30 minutes will be Pat sort of presenting updates on what he's up to, and then we'll open it up for dialogue. Maybe sooner if you have questions for us, Pat. So thanks for joining us.
All right, not a problem. When do you want me to start?
You can start right now. Thanks, everybody.
All right, I'll put it on share and see if I can do this, okay? Can you all see the screen?
Looks great.
Yep.
Okay.
And if you wouldn't mind muting yourself if you're not speaking, that's the only suggestion here.
Okay. I'm going to talk through these slides. I've got about maybe 20 minutes of slides here, but what I'd like to talk about today is how we handle stormwater in today's society and why we don't do it differently, and the mistakes we've made over the past 200 years of settling Michigan, and what it used to be like, and what we can do to solve the problem, and how much water is there, and where is it really coming from, and who has it, and so on and so forth. So each of these slides should talk about that. This slide here, you'll notice the picture of the globe and three balls all together on the globe itself, the globe being the fourth. And that little itty bitty dot down there, that I don't know if you can see it, but that's all the fresh water in the whole world that's available for us to use. That means people in South America and Africa and Europe and whatever, washing, making coffee, washing their car, flushing their toilet, doing their laundry. That's all that's bound up in that little itty bitty ball. And I'd like to talk about that for just a minute. And it's clear that we don't have a good sense of how much water there is. And I think if people realize that the fresh water that we do have, and when it rains and it snows and everything falls on the ground, that we don't have many alternatives to making that the decision to manage that properly. I'll show you how the new form of management works. And about 70% of the globe is covered in water. And that pie chart that I have there shows a difference between salt water and fresh water. And all the fresh water in the world is about 2.5% of all the water in the world. And that by itself is kind of scary, because the human being can't live 24 hours without water intake of some kind. 2 or 3 days you'll be dead if you didn't have any water to take in. People all over the world are using water and abusing water, and we have to stop that. And that is the cause why I'm doing this and why I do what I do. Most of the water, you can see the 25% or the 2.5% of all the fresh water in the world is divided here into three categories. That pie chart tells you the deep water that we can't get to, it's too deep, and some of it's tied up in glaciers, and 0.4% is all we have of all the fresh water. We only have 4% to use. That's incredible. don't you think? I mean, it's to me, it's just incredible. And the number is actually 0.03%, and it's 366, I think, is a right percentage, but four, I rounded up to four to make it easier to talk about. So we have to manage in some way the rainfall and the snow melt and the lakes and the rivers and all that stuff is incorporated within that 4%. So let's talk about how we handle that. And it's good to know that our fresh water in the world, 20% of it is in the Great Lakes. Of all the usable fresh water in the whole world is 20% of it's in the Great Lakes. So if this state isn't the state to draw the line in the sand and say, we're going to protect it, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that that water is safe for us to drink and safe for us to use, and we don't pollute it and so on and so forth. But what I'm trying to impress upon you is the shortage of fresh water that's available anywhere in the world. And we're lucky because we have so much of it. We have 20% of the available 0.4% that's available to humans all over the world. We commit folly. I love the word folly because folly represents us doing something which is not in our best interest. And we do it for short-term gain. And I love that word because it represents how we treat the water. And we think there's an abundance of it. There's lots of it. And it's just not true. And when you look at how much water is in the world, it starts to dawn on you that we have a responsibility to take care of that, not for short-term gain, but for the future of our civilization. We have a responsibility to take care of that water. So let's stop committing folly. I doubt whether we're all going to do it. We all do things like I drink wine, okay, and scotch. Now I know it's not good for me, but I do it anyway. That's folly. And I do other things too, I suppose. And everybody does. They commit folly all the time. They do things that's not in their best interest. Well, what we have to do is we have to understand why we do it and how we can stop it. And that's really what it amounts to in managing the water. So what is a watershed? Well, a watershed can be a lot of things to a lot of people, but really, number two definition there, and I'll let you read all this, but it's a geographic area through which water seeks a common outlet. That's what the dictionary says. But actually, a watershed is more than that. It's a complex, interrelated system whose hydraulic outcome is a river, a lake, or a stream, or an ocean. And all that water runs off the earth through a watershed to somewhere. And the bottom line is that it wants to become saltwater. And all that fresh water that goes down these rivers and streams and over Niagara Falls and so on becomes saltwater. And it diminishes the amount of fresh water we have. Then the oceans evaporate again and builds storm systems and so on and so forth, and it drops it down as fresh water again. So we have a responsibility to manage that water rather than just move it. And we'll get into that in a minute. So this is a definition I wrote back in 1996 about what a watershed really is. And I think it's a system of things. And we have to start thinking systemically. And we can't just like a bedroom community of people who have nice lawns and they're all upper white collar management at factories. They go sleep in this bedroom community. They produce a different kind of pollution than a poor neighborhood does. Poor neighborhoods don't have lawns, so they don't push any fertilizer or pesticide or anything into the water system. So their pollution is different and their values are different. everybody's values in every watershed. I've never met two watersheds that are exactly alike. The geological formation underneath the earth forms differently wherever these watersheds are, and the income level is different. The social behavior, some might be religious, some might be non-religious, whatever, but you wind up with different social values within these watersheds. And we have to think of that when we're building solutions to some of our problems. And that's what I try to do in my job is I try to make that happen. So we should also talk about the word natural. What is natural? Can we create it? Is it something that we can make happen? I don't think so. I think these two definitions straight out of the encyclopedia say they exist by nature. They don't exist with our hand. And the number two is not made with caused by humankind. So I would like to use the term mimic nature. In mimicking nature, we can create all kinds of solutions to the to the freshwater problem. And for purposes of everything that I use the word natural for, it's going to mean mimicking nature, because I can't rebuild nature. Nobody can, and we can't rebuild things to be what they aren't, and they aren't natural. It's not natural to have a Walmart next to a creek. I mean, it's just not natural, right? And that water coming off the Walmart parking lot that dumps into the creek has to be treated differently before it goes to the creek. And the way that we zone our land, the way that we change the uses of our land are all problematic in terms of trying to understand nature and trying to understand the physics of nature. So I think we can do it. We just have to concentrate and make it a priority. Okay? So my solution is the old way of thinking is you move fresh water, between point A and point B. Our new system is different. I like to manage the water between point A and point B and not move it at all. In other words, I move it through systems that mimic nature. And you'll notice out of the 500 and some odd drains that I have across this county, I have 236 of them exist in the Red Cedar River alone. And I have to manage all those outlets. So I have to manage the land in order to manage the quality of the water that goes into the rivers. So it's not an easy job. I have over $2 billion worth of infrastructure that's designed specifically to manage that water. And it requires maintenance, it requires fixing up, and it requires some enlarging. If the township turns a cornfield into a shopping mall and a subdivision, you've changed the river forever. And what you have to do is keep that river the same. Make it go backwards in time, back to the 1700s, which we can never do, but we can come close by mimicking nature. Okay? John Wesley Powell, who was a geologist and is famous for his work on the Grand Canyon, worked for the Secretary of the Interior under the Grant administration back in the 1800s. And he was sent out west to define how the territories out there would make, how many states there should be and whatever. And he came back and suggested to the Secretary of State, which reported to President Grant, that they should all be the watersheds. Well, he drew a map and plotted each state and so on according to the biggest river in their area, and managed the water from a state perspective. And President Grant said all states should be square, and he fired the Secretary of State. So figure that one out. Your short-term decisions make long-term disasters. And I think that's what we have to stop. That's the exact kind of thing that we do all the time. So watersheds are systems. No two are exactly alike. And again, short-term decisions make long-term disasters. And we have to start thinking like John Wesley Powell. And we have to create systems out of these watersheds and manage our water differently. The Red Cedar River watershed, for example, it might surprise a lot of you to know that that 90% of it is man-made. Back in the 1883, we had a petition, an intercounty drain petition between Livingston and Shiawassee County in Ingham County to extend the Grand River from Williamston north, and all of those Livingston County watersheds, and there's just some of them in there, and they're not all there, of course. But this map is clear. Where Williamston was the headwaters of the Red Cedar River at one time, back in the 1800s, and we extended it by hand. All of those branches to the Red Cedar River are drains, and I have 587 of them. They're not all on this map, of course, but they exist in there somewhere. And the Sycamore Creek is a system that it was only natural, kind of went just south of Lansing into Delhi Township, but it didn't extend all the way to Mason. And it was all handmade and all hand dug out and whatever. You used to be able to take the Red Cedar River and jump across it. It used to be 5, 6, 7 feet wide at its widest. Today, near 127, I think we measured it in one spot. It was 74 feet wide. It was incredible how that river has changed over the last hundreds of years. And for thousands of years, it always stayed the same. And then all of a sudden, in the last 150 years, it just blew out of proportion and changed. And I got some maps to show you exactly what I'm talking about. This is pre-settlement conditions that used to exist here in the 1700s. We didn't have aerial photography. Photography hadn't been invented, so I created that on the computer. So it's not a real photo. But nonetheless, it shows the Montgomery Drain today, and it is what it used to look like, according to the DNR's inventory of live species that used to live in the 1700s. They have an inventory of it. And so we took that inventory and we tried to make a photograph that looked like that. And but you can see in 1938 where the Montgomery area, the Montgomery Drain, used to look a lot different. And it was mostly farmland, and subdivisions were just starting to be built. And the city of Lansing is right there. You can see the MSU ball diamond down on in there somewhere. Oh, that's in another map, I'm sorry. But this is, then you'll notice in 2015, we have an aerial of the same area and how much it's grown in.
You're just talking about a shed under 200 square feet, correct? Okay. Okay, great. So you won't require a building permit.
They get done talking.
It can be, okay, it can't be in front of the house. Okay, so it can't go in the front yard. Okay. Yeah, side yard or backyard. 5 feet from side or rear.
Leroy should be able to mute him, but I
Hold on
think
a
he's going to
second.
go over and do it
I
himself.
was muted.
Yeah. Okay. But at any rate, you can see how the percent impervious has increased just in that one photograph. I have Okemos, the village of Okemos, by the way, where you guys are. You can see on the 1938 map, that's how big it was. Most of Meridian Township was farmland. And you can see today in 1992 how much concrete we poured. We're really good at pouring concrete and inventing roads and sidewalks and all that stuff. The Meridian Mall sits right in the middle. And you can see over the last, 80 years or so, we have caused a huge runoff to that river. And the river it grows as we change the use of land. So we have to be conscious of how we treat every zoning problem that comes across our desks. We have to make sure that the water is handled off of that site in a way that doesn't hurt the river, okay? You can see the difference plainly. It's in Montgomery, Darien, and you can see MSU back when it was a college in 1938. You can see the ball diamond or the football stadium right there down in the right-hand side. That's MSU's football stadium. On the picture that we have there in 1996, I think it is, or whatever, you can see the ball diamond down in the right-hand corner. And that whole area has filled in with subdivisions and housing and garage roofs and parking lots and you name it, highway systems and whatever, that all lead to runoff rates which are unacceptable and unmanageable. And we did that because we wanted their tax dollars. We wanted their SUV. And a developer comes to some township somewhere and he cut a deal with a farmer for his land, and the farmer is going down to Florida, and the developer has a plan for a subdivision. The township is right away stands up and says, okay, fine, man, we can use the SUV. The problem is that you have to provide police and fire and all the other services to that. Plus, you have to put up with the damage that's caused to the water system. And it's growth is a two-edged sword, I think, and part of it is good, and the other edge is bad. It's bad because we don't handle zoning properly. We don't use the proper tools afforded us to manage the land properly. So I want you to understand what peak discharge means, and what we talk about when we talk about peak discharge. We talk about how much impervious is in the landscape of that watershed and how fast it makes it to the river. And here's a graph that I have that shows the base flow of the river, and it shows a large storm and a small storm. And you can see how the storm is discharged into the river, and then the river takes it to Lake Michigan. And from Lake Michigan, it goes over Niagara Falls, goes past Detroit, and it's off to become saltwater. And you can see this, how fast it moves. And you can see the relationship between what we have today and what we should have, what it was like in the 1700s, okay? And here is a graph that shows it a little bit better. The green is what we are today, and the dark blue at the top is the base flow of our rivers back in the 1700s. And through all of those different kinds of deforestation and what have you, we have changed the river systems in this county, and we've changed them all over Michigan, actually. You can imagine handling fresh water in Detroit. It's a nightmare. And fresh water in Ingham County is bad enough, but it's just insane. And what we can do is what I'm going to show you. And we can manage the water between point A and point B rather than suffering the consequences of doing nothing. In the 70s and 60s and 70s, some of the rivers in the United States burned. The Cuyahoga River is a famous one. There were about 11 very large rivers that burned. And for 200 years, we created an industry across our Rust Belt or across the Midwest that discharged pollution. We didn't have any pollution control at all. And now I'm starting to put it in to, I'm using the last 20 years to rebuild our system so that we can catch all this pollution. The Montgomery drain alone, which is a drain I'm going to show you on film, one of the drains, is we've studied it for a long time, but we took 3 years and we documented the pollution load on every 1 inch storm or every half-inch storm that we've had. And we wound up with an annual discharge of pollution to that river, to the Red Cedar River from the Montgomery drain of 50,000 to 75,000 pounds of pollution annually. It's unacceptable. I mean, we're supposed to be an industrial nation, not third world country. And that kind of manipulation is not good. You can see the pictures of the parking lot there. I have another slide with some pictures in it too. This is the Red Cedar River at MSU's campus. I put this picture up there because this was the year I graduated from high school. And look at this, it's an open sewer. It's and what bothers me about this picture, he's obviously got a date and they're both in white. And he thinks he's going to get lucky that night or something with that woman. He's taking him for a canoe ride or a swim or a float down down an open sewer. That's incredible. I mean, how did we let our rivers get that bad? And the Federal Clean Water Act came in 1972. It was first passed. I was fortunate enough to meet a man that was part of the team that wrote that law. And it's the best law in my thinking. It's the best law that the federal government ever had. And the difference between the Red Cedar then and the Red Cedar now is all due to the Federal Clean Water Act. And people try to take that act and change it, and the Congress uses it for political gain and whatever. And what we have to do is try to stop that and whatever. But anyway, I like that picture. This is the Montgomery drain today. And this picture, I think, was taken in 2005. And that's the old Montgomery drain boundary there in blue. And all that water used to run through one spot. And I'll show you where it goes into the river here in a second. And today, the boundary is we have parts of the 127 added to it, and we have parts of East Lansing added to it that we have not had in the previous boundary, but we had to change the boundary because of this project. This is the Red Cedar River and the Montgomery Drain outlet, and you can see the pollution. That's a sunny day. It's still coming in there. You can see where we get 50 to 75,000 pounds of pollution annually comes off that watershed into this river. And it's the largest polluting drain that I'm in charge of. And so we fixed it. And we now, well, you'll see here in a minute, and how we fixed it. So the Red Cedar River polluted by the Montgomery drain. There's pictures of it in 1997 and pictures of it in 2016. It's still the same. And then I built this. You don't see that anymore. You don't see any of that contribution. I can take care of, I'll talk about it in a minute, but the problem, we discovered back in 1995 that this was happening, and it became obvious that we had to do something. It took me till 1995 I still got about a month's worth of construction to do on the Montgomery drain, but it took us all that time to get that fixed. You'd think we would want to fix it. It's just a horrendous amount of pollution, 24 hours a day that goes in there. And it's insane. Anyway, and the fish certainly don't like it. The fish right there doesn't like it. He doesn't think it's good at all. That's after 1/2-inch storm in a parking lot in the Montgomery drain, we put a stainless steel filter in there to catch the pollution. That's just after one storm. Now, at one time, back in I can't remember what year it was, 2001, somewhere in there, I put a teaspoon of orange dye in front of the fabric store there, Joanne Fabrics in Frandor. I don't know if you guys know where that is, but and then I got in my truck and I drove down to the river to catch it coming out of the pipes. And I couldn't even drive there fast enough. By the time I hit the lights and whatever, I got down to the river and that orange dye was already coming out of the end of that pipe. That's how fast the pollution left the parking lots to the river. Now that's insane. That's absolutely insane. Look at that gunk. Well, we took care of that gunk. And just to stress how the effect of that, just one part of that pollution load, it cut the oxygen level. With all that organic matter in that pollution load, the oxygen was eaten up and it couldn't feed these fish. But we can feed today, the way the BOD works, that's biological oxygen demand. We were annually depriving the river of oxygen, and you can feed steelhead trout beds. You can feed 26,747 beds with 1,000 eggs in each out of the oxygen annually that we were depriving of that river, just from that pollution alone. Now that's incredible to me. And that number we're an industrial country. We should be able to figure this stuff out, So anyway, I got to go backwards to that slide. This was what I designed as our project goal. Now we took samples we went back in the records to 1905 to 1917 or to 2017, and we found that the average storm, 95.7% of all storm events were 2 inches or less. And we built this facility to handle about 2.5 inches of stormwater. So we cleaned the first 90% or 95% of the pollution comes off in the first 2 inches of water that flush across the surface of the earth. So we think that in planning this, we thought that we could have 96% of all of the water, all the storms, or 96% of the storms could be pollution free, and we would wind up with a little bit of pollution left over in the higher storms, in the bigger storms, when we had to let water into the river. But I will show you in this next picture what we did, how that looks in real life. We can start this film. This is that golf course down there by the river. The river is right behind the trees. I got $400+ spent in economic development. $400 million they spent on developing this part of that drain system. And it was all paid for with private money. The city of Lansing is getting all the taxes off that. There's no tax abatements at all on any of this. They got 2 hotels and so on and so forth. We got water features all over that's run by stormwater, not a consistent source of chemically treated water. And we created this whole system that works just like that. And we move the water around. Between Grand River and Michigan Avenue, I have over 11 waterfalls. And on Michigan Avenue, I have these fountains that I put there, and eventually there's going to be sculptures on the tops of these round pedestals in the middle of the fountains. This is all the Montgomery drain the way I fixed it today. And this goes down the Michigan Avenue, and all of the road water, all of the rubber from the tires of those cars. You think about rubber for a minute, just the tires of the cars. You know how many cars go by there? How many, you've seen piles of tires in pictures, and all of the rubber had to go somewhere. Well, it goes into our rivers and gets caught up in the fish's gills and frogs and all that. So this is looking at Rainey Park. That's Frandor to the top of the screen. We're looking south on Rainey Park. I built all these ponds, and they're designed to help clean the water. And this is the Montgomery drain today as I built it. And it's extraordinary. The wildlife just loves it. And I got blue herons, I got frogs, I even got fish in there, and I just turned the water on this last March. That's our main waterfall right there. And you can see the limestone. The water runs across the limestone, and it takes the acid out of the water. The phosphorus that's in the water column is eaten up by the algae. And then I have rotifords and tardigrades in the water, which are microscopic animals. And you can't see them with the naked eye. You have to look at them through a microscope. But they're in the water column now, and they eat the algae. So I got this cycle that goes around, and I clean that water. And almost all that I can clean about 100,000 pounds of pollution with this system. 100,000 pounds of pollution can be cleaned before a drop of water goes in the river. Now, we think that when we have a 3-inch storm, we're going to wind up with a river coming back over the watershed, and it's coming from Meridian Township and Williamston and wherever, but you can see all the lights on there. The sidewalks even light up. Kind of cool. Anyway, that's the way that we manage water between point A and point B, and we don't move it. With this system, I can handle something like 2.5 inches of rain before I put a drop of water in the Red Cedar River. And all of that pollution, it either gets transformed into some acceptable chemistry, or it falls to the bottom of those ponds, and the bottoms of those ponds get sucked out by every 30 years, we figure. Now, during the nighttime, we're adjusting all the lights so that they light up better. That's part of what I have to do in the next 30 days. But that's a remarkable difference between the way we used to build pipes to move water between point A and point B to managing water between point A and point B. Now, there's a state law that says that you can't put the first 2.5 inches of water. The 2-year 24-hour storm is about 2.5 inches. You have to hold that water back, and you can't put it in the system, or you can't put it in the river. You can't let it leave the watershed. Well, we far surpassed that here. And when your zoning department passes a new subdivision zoning, it should know that it has to write rules within that subdivision that that developer has to pay to build a system that doesn't discharge the first 2.5 inches of water. It's a state law. It's backed by EPA, and it's a wonderful law. This is part of the toll gate drain, which is what I built back in 1998. All of these wetlands and water features you see, I built them. We just put up these signs, and the signs you'll see have stands on them with cutouts of different nature features and whatever. And there's a salamander on that one, for example. I've got about 10 or 15 of these signs up at the toll gate, and we're going to put them at the Grossbeck Park drain, which is to the northeast of there, or northwest of there. And we're also going to put around 20 of these signs at the Montgomery drain. And I just got, I'm working with the poet laureate for the city of Lansing, who's in charge of the Poetry Guild. And she has just applied for a grant to put signs like that up with poetry on it. She's going to put up 30 different signs with poetry. They're all of the poems and all of the sculptures that we're going to put up. We're at the Montgomery Drain, we're going to put up around 50 sculptures. They're all part of phase 2 of the Federal Clean Water Act. And they are going to teach people how not to pollute. And they're supposed to be about nature, the poetry. And she's going to do a contest in the Tri-County area. And all you young poets out there and old poets and people that like to write poetry like I do anyway. And you can write poetry. The poetry signs will be about half the size of these, but she's going to put 35 of them in the Montgomery Drain along the path. By the way, in the Montgomery Drain, I have over 2.5 miles between Grand River and the river. I have 2.5 miles of hiking path. 2.5 miles in that little area. The watershed is only about a square mile big. So part of our goal, this is our end goal. And the Federal Clean Water Act was passed in 1972, and it's now, 2024, and we haven't even come close to meeting the goals of the Federal Clean Water Act. This is the final goal, where we can fish in every single stream, and every single stream, every ounce of water, fresh water, that's available to us to use should be clean by this time. But it's not. Why have we fallen backwards? Why have we committed so much folly? Why have we done this to ourselves? Why have we committed these kinds of terrible actions that lead to the diminishing of our water quality? Well, the real puzzle to me is why urban residents pay millions of dollars to get rid of their water, and then at the same time they pay millions more dollars to go vacation near it, where they put it. Why don't we just clean it up in our own communities? And we won't have to go anywhere to be near it. We could, not to say that vacation's bad, but wouldn't it be cheaper if we just cleaned up our water and quit polluting it? So that's my little slideshow for today, and I'm open to any kind of questions anybody has, and whatever. I can answer most any question you have about water management.
That is awesome, Pat. Thank you for that jam-packed presentation. What questions do people have or comments?
Pat, I'm wondering, how do you relate to, let's say, a developer of a subdivision? Do you regulate some of what they do, or you work with them somehow? What's your kind of role with respect to that sort of development?
Well, developers come to us all the time. They have to have our approval. And my standards are somewhat stricter than most counties, but they're not that much stricter. And the state law regulates most of the water movement that we do in terms of its 2.5-inch rule and its 2-year 24-hour storm rule. So we tell that to the developer, and we make sure that the engineer for the developer is there so they understand. We try to say that ahead of time, and what we have, most of the time the developers come in a year ahead of time to find out what we want, and then we never hear from them again. They never work with us, and we're open to them. We're open to them working side by side with us. We're open to everything about it, and they wind up at the last minute. They find out the townships won't approve it until it has my signature on their water system, and then they blame us for holding them up. Well, too bad. That's what I say. You know, if you're not smart enough to solve those problems, have your engineer solve the problems over the year of design and design solutions into the subdivisions, then you deserve not to build right away. And is the way I feel it. Three election cycles ago, I had the development community hates me, by the way. They don't like me at all, which is okay with me. I don't really care. And they spent $330,000 with a candidate to beat me in office, and I spent around $25,000, and I beat him 2-1. It was incredible. That tells you what the public wants. The public wants their water to be managed properly. And they want the subdivision too, because they don't, and I'm not anti-Walmart or I'm not anti-big box store or whatever, but you can build them right. You can build them so that they don't have to be evil, you know, to our water system or our river. But we don't do that. Most townships, they don't have sophisticated processes, and most of those zoning and land use changes happen without my knowing. And they just have to come back to me in the end, and they have to do what I say. And I'm as friendly as you can get. I'll sit down with anybody, have a cup of coffee, and explain what you have to do and how you have to design it. And I'll explain it to you over and over again if I have to. But I'll refuse to sign the paper until you meet the requirements. Does that answer your question? Okay. Leroy.
Is there like a template sort of guidelines for locality for low impact development that could be sort of a standard template for multiple jurisdictions that you refer to?
Back in the 90s, I thought that. And as I got into watershed management in depth, I found out that no two watersheds are alike, so there's no template anywhere. And some watersheds produce more pollution than others, and we just have, whether you're rural or whether you're urban, you can solve those problems, but you have to sit down and think about it for a minute. And my background, I'm a fluvial physicist and stream morphologist, and that's what my college degree is in. And I have a minor in cultural anthropology. And how people can't grasp the concept that they don't need a template to solve the water problem. You don't need one. You have to look at each zoning and each land use change and each watershed differently. And you have to be creative in your solution. And we need more engineers that are more creative than the engineers that we have on board today. They're still operating, most of the engineers I deal with, they're still operating with the 1950s book of engineering, the black book of engineering. Instead of using low impact design, they concrete, man, move the water out of there. I had one engineer come to the office and tell me that I should hire him because he can get rid of wetlands quicker than anybody can. And I said, I'm in the business of building wetlands. I'm not in the business of getting rid of them, so I don't think I got any work for you, you know? And he thought that was good. Well, most people think it's good. Get rid of the wetlands and the vernal wetlands that exist on our landscape. Hell, we've already destroyed 90% of them anyway. I see Paul Pratt is here. He's one of my deputies and cohorts in this effort to try and save the world's fresh water. You'll see him from time to time come to your meetings. And Carla Close couldn't make it today, otherwise she'd be here. The answer to your question is there's no cookie cutter way that you can save the water. We have to be individual on each watershed because they're all different. They have different incomes. They have different housing stock. They have different shopping malls. They act differently. The gas stations are different. All of that stuff is different. And we have to be creative in the way that we handle it. We can't use concrete pipe just to move it anymore. We have to manage it. And we need to go to the source of that problem And where the rain falls and where the snow melts, where that happens on each and every property, we have to be aware that that's going to the river and that is going to affect the river. So our job is to make sure that each of those properties do their part. And it's not an easy task. I can't do it alone. I feel like the Lone Ranger sometimes out there, you know, arguing with a brick wall. But
You,
I'm happen
Cliff Walls recently did a green infrastructure audit when he was with Tri-County of Meridian and sort of came up with about a few dozen suggested ordinance changes that would kind of move us in the direction towards low impact development. And it seemed like that was a no-brainer, but the conversation evolved and it was discussed that maybe we should do this more of on a regional level rather than every separate jurisdiction come up with these different ordinances. Have you talked to Cliff about that green infrastructure audit and how we might move that forward regionally?
I haven't talked to him personally, no. And he hasn't reached out to me, so I don't know. But I can tell you that
I'd butt in a minute, Pat.
Yeah.
Cliff,
you went mute on us, Paul.
Sorry.
Cliff has been talking to us. In fact, last Wednesday was his committee of the Michigan Water Environment Association was who you gave the Montgomery tour to. But I think one of the real problems on regional ideas is that again, every watershed is unique. There's huge political resistance outside the county. I've got a long rant about the Ramey Chandler Intercounty, which takes in 9 jurisdictions in both Clinton and Ingham. And we've pretty much over the years settled for, okay, we're going to do it our way on the Ingham side of the line, and Clinton will do it their way on the Clinton side of the line. You can spend a huge amount of time arguing with people. I think our experience has been that we just need to do what we can on our side of the line. I would say that one of the cultural problems all across the region is the idea that you need to keep trying to grow your SEV to have economic prosperity, and that just insists on constantly more paving, more paving, more paving, and then nobody wants to enforce the technical name for the law that Pat was talking is it's the Federal Channel Protection Act, and it says no, you don't get to just pipe your stuff downstream anymore. And we've had huge resistance from the developers to that. They want to just do the old-fashioned thing, hold it back for 24 or 48 hours and then let it go. And that does not accomplish, I mean, it's necessary, but it doesn't accomplish stuff. And so then they want to hold it in underground detention, and they want to, they just, again, they're dealing with old kind of technology. And we've told them, for example, we've had engineers develop software for or use software for showing how much credit, how much water holdback credit you can get for growing trees and keeping the mature trees that are there. That's still just a surprisingly hard sell to say no. Leave the site as much as natural as it is, as it can be. I mean, natural, again, there's no virgin forest left, but there are good sized trees in a lot of places, and you can leave them, and we'll give you credit for the amount of water that they catch and hold, and then just evaporate. And but again, when you're faced with this economic imperative, people think that they just need to keep building subdivisions, and they need to keep building developments, and they have to keep their parking. You know, you pry their parking spaces out of their cold dead hands, and you know, it just so it is not simple. That's in part, that's why we continue to do the folly, is because it's very complex, and you have to think it through. And that's why it's fun working for Pat, because we're still at it, and we're not going to give up.
And I had
We have, just to know, we have 3 more minutes, or about 4 more minutes. So go ahead.
And I did a study, Carla and I did a study back maybe 15 years ago, and it showed that whenever a community advances itself by building subdivisions and apartment buildings and whatever, that it has to hire more than the tax revenue off that property. It has to hire and rebuild the sewer systems and rebuild all of the police protection, ambulance service, and flushing of toilets and whatever. If you put all that stuff together, it adds up to more than what you get in tax revenue from that development. So somehow we have to realize that those developments have an impact, and we have to understand the impact of those developments and those land use changes. And in my field, I try to understand them as they happen to the receiving body of water. And as you can see from my slideshow, that we don't have much water. And I mean, we might be in the middle of the Great Lakes, but we still don't have much. And in Africa and Europe, they have all kinds of restraints on how you can use the water and how fast how the plumbing works. And they have figures of economic use of water. But we don't have a solution to it other than building. We have to look at each proposal that each person brings in and look at that proposal, how it's going to impact the water that we use and how it's going to impact the way that the water runs to the river. And I try to do that. And I'm hated by most of the developers in the county because of that. But I don't really care. And they're going to have to present their facts to me, and I'll tell them what we're looking for. And I'll tell them what the federal government, what the U.S. Corps of Engineers and the State Department of Eagle, now it used to be the DEQ, and it's called Eagle, and I are looking for. And you're going to have to obey those laws, or you just aren't going to build. And we have to put our foot down, and we have to get the township boards to put their foot down and say, no, you can build a Walmart if you want to build a Walmart, but you're going to build it the right way. You're not going to build it the wrong way. That creek running next to you it's not natural to have your Walmart there. So let's create a discharge from your development that meets our standards and keeps our water clean. That's it, period.
Pat, there's a question in the chat from Kim Peters, and she's asking about the details of what we have to hold back. I do not trust myself to actually answer that right, and what I think I will do is have Angie send the exact standard to this group, to Leroy, to distribute.
Right. Each development is different, like each watershed is different, and basically you have to have a certain amount of water that's you already have on the land as it exists today. It holds back water, and there's some water that stays there. So that's discounted off the 2.5 inches. Then as you build, you have to figure out how you're going to handle the rest of it. And there's a formula that's used by the state and by the federal government that makes that happen. And I tell you, it's just insane. I see all that flooding down in Texas, for example, got a $2 billion grant to build a big, huge retention pond, miles apart, and from the U.S. Corps of Engineers. And they built this detention thing to handle the hurricane waters when they came, so their cities wouldn't flood. And after the U.S. Department of or the U.S. engineers gave up their hold on that land, the Texas board approved it for subdivisions. They put the people right down in the water. I mean, come on. Why do we do that? Why do we do such stupid things? And I think we have to be smarter at how we manage our water. And that's a simple statement, but it's very difficult to do. And how we can handle that is pretty difficult. So
that's a great segue. We can certainly stick around as long as people want to talk, but we usually try and cut this off at about an hour. Just want to thank all of you for showing up, Paul and Pat. Kind of, it's an inspiring conversation. I think we could probably have a couple more conversations about some of the issues you brought up, and I hope we do.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have suggestions for speakers next week, Rob Kircher is going to talk about some of his work with Absolute Solar. And Paul and Pat, I hope you come back and bring Carla with you.
I'll hang around and answer any questions that I can.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And we'll keep going for a few minutes, probably cut it off about 10:15 but if anyone has any remaining comments or questions, we can go from there.
I do. The Drain Commission recently took over the land by Meyer that used to have the old Shula Books building there, which was torn down. And
Correct.
Right, I believe it's Grovenberg Meyer Drain. What's the timeline for what you want to do with those parcels?
There's a piece of property on the east side and the west side of Okemos Road there that's going to hold water. And what we found is that in the 1950s, when they built that area up in downtown Okemos, they neglected to put in the proper kinds of water discharge centers. So there's no retention at all. And what we're going to do is, on those two pieces of property, is handle part of the problem. Now, we've already talked to Myers and we've talked to all the different residents in there. That water runs through that neighborhood, which is what's the name of that subdivision? Indian Hills or something like that, to the north of Grand River there. All that water that comes off of the Myers parking lot and comes off of all those buildings around there goes through that system across Grand River and enters into that neighborhood. So that neighborhood has been unblessed with, it's been burdened with flooding for eons. I've got pictures of the 1940 flood from 1975 in there, and I've got a piece of black tape on the signpost that the road signs post. And I've got that black tape. You have to stand on your tiptoes. A 6-foot person has to stand on their tiptoes to reach that tape.
That's Bruce's neighborhood.
Hills. That's my neighborhood.
Yeah. And that's bad. And that whole neighborhood suffers from that. So those two pieces of property are supposed to hold that water back and alleviate some of the flooding that happens in that neighborhood. And we have an ongoing battle with Meridian government right now over the consolidation of those drains and how they should be done. And I'm trying to provide, Lansing Mall has no place to store the water. It all runs downstream, just as lickety split fast off those parking lots and off the roofs. And I want to take it and create places to put that water in that watershed before it hits that neighborhood, and thereby holding the water back. And those are two areas that we're going to do that. And we'll should have those done by the middle of next summer, when we're fully completed on that project.
Can you distill the gist of the ongoing battle? I mean, is it fairly simple or is it complex? I mean, I haven't heard about it.
For example, those two properties, the Schuler bookstore, for example, was listed as worth, I think, $6 million in your DDA, in your Downtown Development Authority money. And we paid 2.8 million for it. Now, 6 million was certainly a large number, and the DDA complained that we were stealing their valuable property away from them and losing the credit they had at the bank because we proved that the property wasn't worth that much. Well, not only you plan on putting an apartment building up there, on the west side of that road, on the west side of Okemos Road, and you're going to have at least 200 toilets, showers, garbage disposals, and you haven't looked at the size of your sanitary pipe yet to even understand whether you can handle that at your wastewater treatment plant. And all of that stuff has to be done before you choose to change the use of that land. Your infrastructure has to be in place first. Look at it this way. Your infrastructure is, all cultures have to have four pieces of infrastructure. You have to have a place to put the water when it comes down, which is the drains. And you have to have a place to flush your toilet. You have to have a consistent source of drinking water, and you have to have a transportation system. Without one of those, if one of those four things are missing, you don't have the leg to that table. It's going to collapse. And before you develop anything, you have to make sure that all four of those systems are in place. Those infrastructure systems are in place. Now, transportation, everybody sees a pothole and they see a bridge that's rusted, but they don't see the pipe falling apart underneath the ground. They just don't see it. So the three of those four things are out of sight, and they're critical. You forget the parks, forget the police department, forget the libraries, forget the subdivisions. If just one of those things are missing, you can't build anything. So you have to have all of those four things. And three of them I'm in charge of. And it drives me nuts to every time a township comes up to me and says, we want to do this. I said, okay, you can do whatever you want, but you have to do it according to certain standards. That's all. And
I'm just wondering where these conversations are. Maybe I'm just clueless. I work with several hundred residents on environmental issues, and these conversations aren't happening necessarily in my circle. And I'll admit that I'm clueless, but if more people knew about what the gives and takes were, I think they might maybe have a different political stance.
The township has to forgive some of that developable land. It has to make holding ponds out of it, and it has to be some sort of LID built into every different commercial property that's built. And all the neighborhoods, the subdivisions and the shopping centers and whatever, you can build them. You just have to build them right. That's all. And all we're trying to demand is that we're building them right. And those two pieces on Okemos Road are part of handling the floodwater that's generated by that watershed, by the parking lots to the south of that. And the highway department just built Grand River up 2 feet so it wouldn't flood, right? Well, part of that 2 foot raising that up takes away a place to store the water. So we have to compensate for that. Now, they compensated for it by building somewhere around the fire station there on Okemos Road, they built some kind of retention area for stormwater that equals to the 2-foot mark. And what we have to do is continue that effort to try to handle that much water that comes off of that area. That is, in all honesty, that's like 90% or about 70% impervious, I think, somewhere in there.
Is it an argument with the DDA or the local politicians, or, I mean, what? Go ahead.
Administrator and your public works director, and your then, it used to be the guy that was the township supervisor. They argued with us all the time about buying those properties. You can't buy them. And we told them ahead of time we were going to buy it, and they said it was okay. And then all of a sudden they turned on us and said you couldn't buy them. And I'm going to, whether you like me or not, I don't really care. But what I'm trying to do is save the water. And you can like that or not like it, but you can see what happens around the world with this fresh water. We don't have much of it. We have to handle it differently. And we're trying our very best to do that. You can say I'm doing it wrong, fine. Then let's have a conversation about it. Because if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. But I don't think I am. I'm studied in this stuff, and I know how a drop of water runs downhill. And let me tell you something. You cannot just build things and have it okay with the water system. It can't be done. You have to think about that. You have to have rules and regulations. And otherwise, you're never going to be whole as a community. Your DDA was a pipe dream, and in my opinion, anyway. And your DDA should, in fact, understand the reality of the infrastructure that exists within its confines, within the DDA boundaries, what kind of infrastructure they have and how they can push development. And I'm certainly in favor of development. Don't get me wrong, but I'm in favor of proper development, not mishandled development.
Just wondering if the conversation maybe needs to expand a little bit beyond, 2 or 3 people and your staff. Just because I don't think that there's consciousness about what the real issues are.
Hey, right, that is exactly what I kind of want to get at here with Pat. The work is great, but I got to let you know, most of my experience has been in Wayne County with the Rouge River, and that was a whole different deal. Like you say, it's a different watershed. Combined sewer overflow was the problem, but there was a huge grant that the Wayne County Department of Environment got, the Rouge River Wet Weather Demonstration Project, millions and millions of dollars, and it just blew the whole thing up publicly. It went to every community. It put out all these education. It paid for huge education programs, and I mean, it got the whole county, people everywhere understanding the problem. And what I'm hearing from you, Pat, it's like, I mean, you're doing great. It's amazing the work you're doing, but it sounds like it's a one-man army trying to fight this. Is there more legs to it that you're not letting us know about? It seems like with all the great work you've done, you've got to have like a ton of consultants behind you, and the public. There's just got to be.
I've been to court so many times with Lansing Township, Meridian Township. Our staff talks to them weekly. We talked to the management of Meridian Township in East Lansing. They went through a city council blow up, and they changed leaderships and whatever, and they're just impossible to talk to. And we reached out and talked to them despite all of that. And all these rural townships, like Allen Township, we're going to court with over a drain issue in the city of Mason right now. And they don't understand that what they approved, I'm supposed to be in a courtroom next week with that. And what they approved wouldn't handle their condo site. And what they came to us and they petitioned us to rebuild it. So we're rebuilding it, and I charged them 30% or 40% of the cost, or whatever it was. Anyway, they said we shouldn't have to pay any of it. Let the condo owners pay it. And it's $1.5 million fix, you know. And you can't just do these things. That problem should have never happened to begin with, but it happened. I had nothing to say about inside the city of Mason, and it should have never happened to begin with. Now it's going to cost $1.5 million to fix it. The city of Mason doesn't want to pay their share. Well, that's fine. They can let it go to a judge and or a jury and a board of board of necessity, or it's called a board of something. I can't remember what the name is. But anyway,
Board of Review, Pat.
Board of Review, and they decide what the assessment's going to be. And at that time, it's out of my hands. We're going to still do it, but they can figure out the numbers. And when it boils down to it, it's all about money. And the developer wants to make a fortune. He sells all his parcels. He's gone within a year and a half. And it doesn't have it. There's nobody in between that. And you say I'm like a Lone Ranger. Well, I feel like it sometimes. I don't have any of these people out there.
You need some help, man. You're doing great, but we got to get an army behind you.
I know.
And some cooperation. These people got to get their heads around this and all work together on it.
I agree.
Can I throw something in, Pat? My part of the problem is that it's both a benefit and a problem. The drainage laws are so old, and they're set up on the idea of user pay. And so our initial resistance to anybody is, wait a minute, I pay enough taxes. Why isn't why are you charging me more? And in fact, it's one of the benefits of living in the city of Lansing, as I do, and the city of East Lansing, because your taxes are higher, but they do pay for your storm drains. And in fact, on the county drains that serve parts of Lansing and East Lansing, those cities pay your individual. They do not pay, you as a property owner do not pay a county drain assessment on your property because the city taxes pick it up. And so we have this real resistance to all over the county to why do I have to pay more? And it's a natural reaction. And then you get to argue about who pays it. And we end up with these small drainage districts, 20, 30, a little subdivision out in one of the townships, 50, 75, 90 parcels. They can't afford $1 million or $2 million storm drain fix. And so we have done, I think, a really good job of finagling, convincing the town, the communities that, okay, you need to take an at-large share of this because otherwise your citizens are being denied drainage. And that's not good for you to have undrained portions of your community. And so, but these are case by case basis. We have talked the county into doing something. When there's a benefit for county roads, we do get to assess for that. We've talked them into taking a higher at large in return that we will do less charge for maintenance as the years go on.
Let me just
we used
interrupt.
ARPA. We used American Rescue Plan money that was voted by the county. We go everywhere we can to make it to make it more affordable. But the fact is, we live in a swamp, and we think we're going to be high and dry, and it's not easy.
So I just want to on low impact design.
Yeah.
Caught that Montgomery project with a big waterfall. That project and all those ponds and everything cost 50% less, at least 50%, somewhere around 40% less to build that than it would be to just take the water to rebuild the storm sewer system in such a way that it would take the water directly to the river without any abatement at all. I can take the pollution out of that water for 50% of the cost. Most low impact design drain systems cost somewheres around 20% of the original of what it would cost to do traditional engineering, 30%, 25%, something like that of the cost. On the toll gate drain, for example, on the toll gate, you saw the signs there at the toll gate. That drain costs us, it was scheduled to take the water to the river. We could pay somewheres around 23 to 28 million. That was back in 1998. I built that whole system for less, replaced all the sewers in the streets, replaced the sanitary and the storm, and put those ponds in and the wetlands in and so on in the Grosse Pat Golf Course for 6.3 million. Now, if you take the 18 or the 23 to 28 million that we would have spent, and people argue that I have to maintain it, so I have to spend around $35,000 a year. I can use that. I can maintain it for 600 years and still not spend what I would have if I'd have built it the way that the old engineers think of. Think of that. So it's cheaper to go LID than it is to do, what we do is we mimic nature and we make the water run downhill the way it's happy. I want every drop of water to be happy. And we take the pollution away from it. We have tardigrades. We have rotifers in the water system. They're microorganisms that eat that pollution. And we have a whole system of soil bacteria and whatever that we figured out can clean that water. In the toll gate, I can handle a 500-year storm and never put a drop of water into the Red City River. Think of that.
Pat, I hope you'll come back and we'll continue this conversation. I just want to if anyone has a parting comment, we should probably wrap it up fairly soon, even though I'm tempted to just keep going here. Does anyone have any parting comments? And try and eliminate further dialogue, but Sam,
Outstanding work. Just keep going.
Yeah, well, we'll keep doing that,
Keep it
Sam.
up.
Fighting the battle.
can we have you guys back next month, maybe, if we can squeeze an hour out of you?
You can, anytime that you want to, I'll preach clean water to the best of them. To anytime, any place, any bar, anywhere, any nudist camp, you name it, I'll go and preach clean water. So.
Thanks everybody for hanging in there. This is one of the longest green dialogues we've had in 3.5 years, but
okay.
It's interesting. Have a great day.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having us.